can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time today? Hi. What brings you here? You didn't know there'd be a follow-up question, huh? Yeah. What brings you here?
I just wanted to sit and listen.
Yeah. Nice. Well, you are welcome to sit and listen. I'm glad you're here. I will caution you, though, do not make the mistake of thinking that these folks are like-minded. If you do that, I know a lot of them, and you don't want their minds. And I'm leading this, and you definitely do not want my mind. Most importantly is to understand your mind, and how can you be at peace with your mind amongst a bunch of other people who are trying to be at peace amongst their own minds. But nobody in here has a mind that is alike. You're all so different, with so many different experiences, so many different traumas, so many different joys, so many different views, so many different perceptions. So much difference in the people that come to places like this, truly. And I love when people say that, which is probably 1 out of 5 people who are new say that they want to sit with like-minded people. And I love it because it's a reminder for me to touch on the fact that none of your minds are alike. And my mind is completely different from what it was an hour ago. I mean, I have an hour of new information that has changed my mind completely on so many things. And this practice is really about recognizing what is the nature of your mind and coming to terms with it. That's the practice. And there is something to say about the beauty of people who come together in a place like this here, or any spiritual place. I would say that there is an intention that is very similar. And that intention is usually around finding a sense of peace or happiness or calmness or stillness or spiritual journey, whatever that intention is. Most people don't come to places like this to be, less happy. Or you don't usually show up at this place to cultivate more anger or be more mean to people on the roads, right? Most people come to places like this with a similar intention, which is to find some sort of quiet or calm or stillness. But even that, everybody's intention for coming here is so different. Some people come on a Wednesday night because they're just bored and don't want to sit at home, right? So it's always different why we come together. And no matter what the reason is that we come together here or anywhere on a journey like this, I'm glad we do, because it creates opportunities for us to settle, to get quiet, to listen to each other, to learn from each other, and to really practice together. And what that practice looks like is different for each of you. So thank you for saying that, because it allowed me to say that, and a reminder for people. So, all right, so we're going to go ahead and start with the meditation practice. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. Feel free as you are to say hello in the chat box somewhere there on your screen. For those who are maybe new or joining here for the first time, a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you, right? You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders if comfortable. Hands, if comfortable, can be on the knees or lap or whatever is comfortable for you. I will guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. You'll hear sounds. This is life. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from your practice. Just sitting, breathing. learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. Realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges. And this practice is learning to be with life as it arises and not run from it. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. But it'll help you become aware of your life that's a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can begin to make changes in your life. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in every moment. Learning to be kind to yourself and every person you encounter. That's the practice. It's not complicated. Yes, the Buddha lived a long time ago in a land very far away, and so we tend to think that it's this very esoteric thing. It's just learning to live a simple, peaceful way of life. He was a prince, and he decided to become a homeless, wandering beggar to focus on his spiritual journey. That's it. He gave up the things that didn't matter to him and things that kept him from finding a sense of peace and happiness. Now, we are not nuns or monks in this room. This message is not that you need to give up anything necessarily. But, and not even in a physical sense, most of us carry mentally, emotionally, a lot. And so the Buddha was a renunciate. He chose to renounce things that kept him from his awakening. And so for me, this practice has always been looking at What keeps us from understanding our suffering? What keeps us in a place of constant suffering? What keeps us in a place of attachment and craving and desire? What keeps us in a place from not being able to just be at peace with life as it is? So for me, Buddhist practice has always been a mirror, not to learn about anything outside of myself. Nobody else causes my suffering and nobody else causes my joy. That's all on me, 100%. What other people think and say and do, that's their mess. And if I want to engage in the world to create change, which I strongly suggest we all do, can we do it from a place of loving kindness and compassion and not from a place of hatred and anger? So this practice is not about ignoring what's going on in the world and pretending the world isn't a mess. But the world has always been a mess, and it will always be a mess. That mess changes. We put heavier meaning on it for various reasons, decade after decade after decade. Has always been and will always be, sadly. But the question is, are you a mess? And that's what this has been about. Getting to know your thoughts and your words and your actions. That's your karma. That's what you bring into the world. How's your karma? How are you showing up? And how are you bringing your thoughts and your words and your actions into the world? And that's it. And if they feed yourself and your pride and your ego, then there's a lot of attachments and there's probably a lot to give up. So for me, this renunciate path has nothing to do with becoming a nun or a monk. It can, but for the most part in Western culture and learning about Buddhism as lay people, in all the years I've been around this, I've known one that said, yeah, I'm going to become a monk. Otherwise, no. But what do you hold on to in your day-to-day life that if you set it down, it wouldn't be a burden anymore? And very often those things you're holding on to are views of yourself, views of others, views of how you think the world should be, and how different it actually is. So with that, I'll pause. Always prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. To those who are joining virtually, welcome again. Glad you're here. Feel free as you are to say hello. The chat box on your screen somewhere. If you have any questions, you can put them there. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions.
So I appreciate you always pointing out that the dependent origination is not all the stuff that's happening out here. It's all the stuff that's happening in here. And I can 100% grasp if somebody does something that is upsetting to me, I can take the skills that I've been learning through this practice and apply it to the non-reactive to that. And the part that jumped into my mind this morning was the joy. And I'm in a position at work where I have customers, clients that will tell me how wonderful the experience was with me. And I just completely, and I'm not saying I'm not going to have the joy of that, but I just recognizing how that's sometimes my reaction to that is definitely ego driven. And so I know how to pause when I have a not so positive interaction, but applying that pause to the customer who's saying, thank you so much for helping me. Thank you so much for making my day more pleasant. Learning how to apply that same pause to that. So
Yeah.
If you could speak to that.
Yeah, so the question, to paraphrase for those virtual or anyone who didn't hear, is that in essence, you started out by saying you appreciate me pointing out dependent origination and that everything is all about everything outside of us and not or it's not everything outside of us. It's our reaction to everything outside of us. And so you gave an example of at work, being able to pause. And when people give you praise, recognize that that's, kind of feeding your ego a little bit. And, the reality is that regardless of what the feedback is, if people give you praise for doing a good job, or if people tell you you did a terrible job, either way, that's their perception. Has nothing to do with you. Zero. Maybe at work or in other areas of our lives, I'm sure we all can imagine a situation where we did or said or acted the exact same way to one person and it went favorably. And then we did the same thing to someone else and didn't work out so well. That's contingent upon their state of mind, their emotional space, not yours. So the practice ultimately, and again, I get it for people who are like, well, what's wrong with feeling good? There's nothing wrong with feeling good. But the Buddhist teachings wasn't about making sure that you all feel good. If you work on non-attachment and cutting through craving and desire to have everything go your way, you'll never feel not good. And you know how you feel when you feel not good? Good. Feeling not good is pretty good, right? But ultimately, it doesn't matter what their perception of you is. Praise or blame, their perception. If the praise makes you feel wonderful, nothing wrong with feeling, again, for those who are maybe brand new, there's nothing wrong with feeling wonderful for getting praise. Yay, praise, praise, praise. You're all great, all right? Nothing wrong with that. But again, the Buddhist teachings wasn't about making sure you all feel good and that you get praised all the time. So when you begin to recognize that you being praised makes you feel good, why do you think that is? Because most of your day you feel what? Not good. And all of a sudden the praise comes in, you're like, oh, it's like a warm hug. Well, you don't need a warm hug if you don't feel like crap all day long. So very fine line here, and very difficult I think, to put this into practice, to actually begin to realize that it's not about making sure you all get hugged all day long. It's about recognizing, why do you feel that you need the hug all day long? What is so wrong? What is so bad that you crave that praise and that attention and that ego, as you say, to be kind of stroked? That's, to me, ultimately this practice. Praise or blame, their perception of you based on your actions. Which does not, I also want to say, does not exclude our responsibility for working on coming from a place of loving kindness and compassion in our actions. Working on coming from a place of wisdom and compassion. Right? This is not about, well, I can just treat you like crap and then your response to that is up to you. That doesn't excuse us from working on coming from a place of kindness. But regardless of what place we come from, their response to it is their response. Yeah. What else?
I have
Yeah.
a kind of mundane question. During meditation, sometimes itch develops and you want to scratch it.
Yeah.
So one option would be to you just scratch it and go back to breath.
Yeah.
Second, you just observe the itch and intensity increases, decreases, and it fades away.
Yeah.
Then you go back to breath. Is there anything wrong with the second option?
Nothing wrong with the first option. Nothing wrong with any option. You could jump up and down if you want when you have an itch. You might disturb Carla and Brenda here in front of you, but I
was thinking that at that time, that's what is happening in body and your.
Of course. Yeah. So let me back up for those virtual, anyone who didn't hear. Your question is, as you said, more of a mundane question. You said during meditation, two things could happen. One is you recognize you have an itch. And you could either, scratch your itch and then be done, or you could just observe it and let the itch go away. There's also a very high probability that a third thing could happen.
That you have to scratch it anyway.
No, well, that you observe it and it actually just drives you crazier, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. You ever had to pee really bad? And the closer you get to like the toilet to where you can actually go pee, it gets worse and worse and worse. The mind does crazy things, right? And so what I was always taught, ultimately, yeah. So the first path is, if you have an itch, just itch it and done. End of story. Second is itch it, observe it, back to breath. Or, observe the itch, you feel it, back to breath. Observe it, back to breath. Observe it, back to breath. And just continue. Observation, back to breath, observation, back to breath, observation, back to breath. But if that begins to emotionally bother you and annoy you, and all of a sudden you're thinking something along the lines of, I hate this meditation. Why can't I just scratch my, cheek? What's wrong with scratching my cheek? I'm just trying to be at peace. Why do these people think I'm a bad meditator if I scratch my cheek? And then you start getting into this whole analytical thing, like, am I doing it right or wrong? If you go into that mode, you would have been much better off to just do this and return to stillness. It really, to kind of expand on that a little bit, Normal, nothing to have to do with your question really, but it's really a funny thing, especially when people begin to do meditation. They get so wrapped up often, not everybody, but so wrapped up in kind of the look of it and the feel of it. And it's a funny thing too with aging or, certain limitations where people feel like early on, they're like, oh, I gotta sit on a cushion. Like if I sit on a cushion, I'm a better meditator. How many people over the years have like kind of phased out? I mean, as the body ages, some of you people in here will tell you, you just don't sit on a cushion the same way you used to. And some people will tell me they get on a cushion, they probably wouldn't get back up, right? So, but there's this ego for some where like, oh, I want to sit on the cushion because if I sit on the cushion and I sit a certain way, then that means I'm a good meditator. I mean, I'm a Zen practitioner. It's how I learned. And there are 7 solid points of ways to sit. And you do not budge. You do not move. You breathe. And that's it. Right? And if you're hardcore Zen practitioner and you're training that way and you're in that setting and, you got your stuff. I mean, they literally tell you where to put your tongue. The tip of the tongue would go where the roof of the mouth meets the top of the gums or the teeth, right? Where the teeth meet the gums. And you would swallow once, keep the tongue there, and close the mouth. And you would hold it there. Your arms would be out a little bit like this, as if you had a tennis ball right here. Your hands would be like this. Your thumbs would touch together. You would make a perfect little circle right here. Your eyes would be open, gazing off the edge of the nose, about 1 foot to 2 feet in front of you. Your head, you would imagine there was a string gently pulling you up so your spine is perfectly straight. And you would hold that until the bell hit to say you were done. There's a great story. Shunryu Suzuki Roshi built San Francisco Zen Center back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. There's a story where as he got older, apparently a wonderful book about him creating that space by David Chadwick and a lot of interviews in that, but called Crooked Cucumber. And there's a story in there where she's talking about, I think as Suzuki Roshi got older, his memory, started to fade a little bit. And not that anyone in here can relate to that. And there's a story where she says he started meditation and then he would kind of wander through the market. They were doing a long sit, all day sit. And the story is that she thinks he maybe forgot that they were there. And she had to go get him to bring him back to like hit the bell because none of the students would dare move until he was there. Right, Carol? You know the practice. You do not move until that bell hits. So there's hardcore Zen training like that. And most people will be like, well, my leg hurts. I want to move. What's wrong with that? Nothing. So you need to move. As I always say, if you need to move, move. If you need to cough, cough. If you're sick, go home. Yeah.
But if you want to observe, that's okay.
And to observe it, absolutely, observe it. Yeah, observe it without the creation of the story. Yeah. Question here, and to Michael, hello, Keegan, Craig, and Mikey. There's a question here, Jeff. Could you clarify the idea of non-attachment? I have a loved one in deep emotional pain. I can't fix another's pain, but can I detach from strong fear about the outcome? So, common question, also one of the few most misunderstood, in my opinion, teachings in Buddhism. Very clearly, even in your language, which I always say, and you've probably heard me say this before, Cinda, non-attachment is not detached. Non-attachment is not detached. It is not cutting off. It is not severing. It is not caring. One of the best teachings I ever got on non-attachment was non-attachment is absolute love, beyond manipulation, beyond control. It's just loving people and places and things for who and how they are. Anyone ever here think they've loved someone? Anyone also at the same time try to control, manipulate, and want them to be exactly how you want them to be? That would be love with a lot of asterisks, right? A lot of conditions on what you think love is. I love you, but just do everything I want, and then I'll love you more. Non-attachment is loving them for how they are. Now, in your question here, which again is very common, we often, many if not all of us, observe, witness, see, and experience people in deep emotional pain. And none of us want that. They don't want that. We don't want that. The question I always ask, usually easier when they're in person, but the question to you, Cinda, would be, have you ever been in a deep emotional pain? The answer is typically yes. And then the next question is, in that moment, have people told you what to do to get out of that deep emotional pain? And how well did you listen to them? And the answer usually is not so well, right? All of us in this room have been in deep emotional pain at some point in our lives. And somebody who loved us came to us and said, you should do this. You should try this. You should go here. How many of you like being told what you should do? Nobody. No matter how right it is, we are not going to do things, for the most part, this is a very broad generalization, but typically we do things when we're ready to do them. I'm sure we've all been in places in our lives where people have given us advice and we knew that was best, but we just couldn't do it. And that's okay. So in this situation, Cinda, to your question, you're right. You can't fix another's pain. And you also don't have to detach. You can love them. You can be present. You can show up for them. That's what you can do. And maybe it's received well. Maybe it's not. Maybe they want to hear it. Maybe they don't. But again, back to the earlier question, the flip side to the earlier question is you can bring what you bring to a situation. You can love and care. That's non-attachment. But if you love and care for their emotional pain and you're telling them what to do and they don't listen to you, and then you get angry that they're not listening to you, that is attachment. That is love with an expectation, with a condition. That's attachment. Non-attachment says, in the Bodhisattva practice, they talk about giving. No gift, no giver, no receiver. So to give without any expectation of anything in return. How often can you really say that in your life, that you've given something without expecting something in return? Really ponder that. That's the Bodhisattva, the enlightened being practice, is to give without expecting anything in return. It's a beautiful Sri Lankan monk years ago gave a story about non-attachment, and this exactly what I'm talking about. And the example was buying a bike for a child. And he told the story of someone who's buying a bike for a child and the excitement of buying the bike. Also, the Buddhist teachings on generosity. The word is dana, which translates to generosity, not money. Dana is not money. Dana is generosity. And the Buddha said the greatest thing you can give is the gift of the Dharma, meaning the teachings, the practice. He also said there's 3 factors for giving to be true dana: pleasant before, pleasant during, and pleasant after. And so the example the monk gave around this teaching was that when you buy a bike for a child, you feel pleasant before, shopping, searching for the bike. When you give the bike to the child, you feel pleasant during. And then as the child rides off and falls and just whatever they do on the bike, you're bummed that they fell, but you still have joy through this whole process. That's dana, that's generosity. There's no expectation of anything in return. Now, if you give a bike and 3 weeks later you haven't gotten your thank you card or a call and now you're all mad, it's not generosity. That's giving with an expectation. So, what else?
You mentioned how often we're attached to our views,
Hmm.
and that probably very often our views are wrong.
Hmm.
Can you elaborate on how to either give up those views
Hmm.
without views, or to better question our views so they are gradually closer to reality?
Yeah. So the question is, I mentioned earlier about views being wrong. And your question is, how do we, in essence, get closer to our views being reality? And then you also said, how do we give up our views? So where I get that teaching from is Thich Nhat Hanh's great talk titled, you can put it into YouTube titles, What is Nirvana? I think it's 7 minutes and 42 seconds long. It's one of the greatest teachings I've ever seen. And I've been talking about it for years. And in this talk, Thich Nhat Hanh says all views are wrong. Always understand, anybody who sits up here leading anything, they're just making stuff up from what they heard. None of us know. I can't do this. I've been saying a lot recently because people don't get this. I can do maybe 30% of the stuff that I talk about. If I can do 30% of the stuff I talk about, I'm having a good day, So keep that in mind when I say these things. This is not like, oh, Jeff has figured this out and he's trying to teach us how to do it. No. This is just like math. You either know it or you don't. You can do it or not. But, so anyways, the idea of all views are wrong, what he's saying is that there is reality. And this is kind of the end of your question. And then there's our perception of it. And this idea that all views are wrong, when I first heard this teaching, I was like, I don't like that view. I think that's wrong. Because none of us want to feel like our views are wrong. And he says nirvana, freedom from suffering, is freedom from views. And so then my thought was like, well, am I going to never have views in my life? And this is just how I have incorporated this teaching into my life. I'm going to have views my entire life. Every single day of my life, I'm going to have views. So to one of the things you said, I'm not trying to get rid of my views. I don't feel that that's ever going to happen. And that is a view. But the question is, am I attached to my views to where I think my views are right? Now, as you've probably heard me say before, how many of you roam around all day long debating, arguing, expressing, talking, posting on social media, all kinds of views that you just think are wrong? Or are you expressing what you think is right? Every conflict is your view versus someone else's view. It's the nature of all conflict is different views. Now, when we feel our view is right, that means someone else's view is what?
Wrong.
Why? Why is our view? I know this isn't your question. I'll get there eventually, but I just want to drive this home. Why is our view right and theirs is wrong? There's so many things in this room that I right now could say, do we all agree on X? And I guarantee we would all agree. I could say, do we all think, or if I say this is right, and we all would think this is right. And if I could say this is wrong, we all would think this is wrong. And then there's a million other things that this room would be split. No joke. Don't shock yourself. This includes political views. Do not think that just because somebody goes to a Buddhist temple, they have the same political views that you do. You'd be shocked, right? Everybody in here has different views. Goes back to my like-minded thing, right? We all have different views, but we're stuck on our views. And so the ultimate question is, what you're asking is, well, how do we get closer to seeing the true nature of reality? So when I look at something, whether it's a physical object, whether it's a dialogue, like a conversation with somebody, for me as a practice, where I begin with is understanding that my view, which I have, and many of them are probably never going to change. and many of them will change. But in that attachment to my view, can I at least open up to listen to what other people's views are? Can I try to understand them? Because if I think my views are right, I have just closed the door, and there's no space for dialogue or communication or understanding. It's helped me to understand this idea of all views are wrong, to know that my view is not correct. I mean, I tell myself that a million times every day. Every time I have a strong view on anything, I tell myself, Jeff, this is just your view. You're not right. And it doesn't mean I then abandon that view. It doesn't mean I give it up and change my view. It doesn't mean I agree with the people who oppose my views. It's just a reminder to me that it's just mine. And there are millions of people out there that would completely disagree with me. So our perception of reality is not reality. Tell yourself you're wrong all day long and still fight for what you believe in. That will allow you to fight with love and compassion without hatred and anger. And that's what, people like Thich Nhat Hanh, Martin Luther King, the great, spiritual leaders of our time, that's what they were teaching, is to fight, but fight with love and compassion. As the monks said during the Vietnam War, after the Vietnam War, they said their greatest fear was losing compassion for those who were torturing them. We lose compassion for the person who made our latte the wrong way. My sandwich wasn't, made properly. They put mayonnaise on it. And we're all pissed off, like our life has been ruined. We get so angry at the smallest little things, for the most part, that don't even matter. And then when big things happen that do matter, it just devastates us. We're like, I don't know how to deal with it. But you're still angry that you didn't get enough pumps of whatever in your latte. Yeah, it's a hard one for sure. But our perception of reality is not reality. And also, for those who are new, this doesn't mean the Buddha did not speak reality. The Buddha's words were also not reality. The Buddha's words were also just his perception of reality. The goal is not to become like the Buddha. Beautiful teaching I heard years ago was, don't seek to be like the Buddha, seek what he sought, which was seek how to renounce the attached views that you have and what you're clinging on, what you're clinging to and what you're holding on to. Seek that. That's what he was seeking. He did it his way, and we all can do it our own way. What else? Yeah.
I'm beginning to experience feelings of romantic love for someone to the point where it's getting very hard to get her out of my mind. How does non-attachment play into romantic love? Because it seems that all of our culture says, you're mine, you're the one meant for me, I can't live without you. Is there a way to bring
Well, the moment you say you're mine, that sounds very possessive.
Yeah.
The way our culture plays up romantic relationships is pretty disgusting. It's a possession. No one is yours. Start there. Start with you changing your language around this, which only requires you to unravel every single thing you've been conditioned to think and believe your entire life. So it should be, by noon, you should be good to go. But you kind of, you're right on in the fact that, yes, our culture really does play up this idea of ownership in a relationship. And it's not ownership. We're not objects to be, possessed. And I think it starts with understanding that, again, for those who may be new to Buddhism, romantic relationships are beautiful to have. There's nothing within Buddha. Often people think not you, I know, but often people think the Buddha was a monk, so therefore Buddhists can't fall in love or can't have relationships or this or that. Yes, you can. You're not monks or nuns, right? But be mindful and aware. The teachings around sexual misconduct within the first 5 precepts. What is the intention behind the relationships that you are engaging in? What is the intention behind it? And once we begin to explore that, then we can look at, is it actually love? Or is it infatuation, obsession, manipulation, control, Did I say possession? Because, especially us as men, I mean, I just turned 50 years old. So anyone my age or older, and you may be a year or two older than me, we have been conditioned as men to control and own and possess, especially as white men. That is ingrained in our way of being. I love my parents to death. They've been married 57. They just celebrated their 57th anniversary, and, very old school, traditional, born 1943, 1944. And everything I watched growing up that I thought was the way to be, no, not so much. Just because it was accepted at a certain time, at a certain generation, in a certain way, does not make it okay. So to really, which is why you're asking this question. I was going to say, to really check yourself and ask yourself and observe, and find in a healthy, appropriate way, find younger people to talk to about this stuff in a healthy way, not in like some, like weird way, because that could get weird, but really, I mean, we can learn a lot from the people who are 20 to 30 years old in the way that relationships exist, and, actual respect and appreciation for the other, versus kind of this, old white man control, dominate the woman and do everything for her because we think they can't do it. And so part of that is really waking up to our own privilege, our own, just sexist views that we've had our whole lives because of how we were conditioned, depending upon where and how we grew up. And it's not about fault or why we are that way, but it's about recognizing that that's how we grew up. And we want to shift that and change that. So continue to explore that. Yeah, it's important. Anything else before we close? There's a question here that says, is there a way to ease my fear? It is fear I struggle with. In brief, because we're about to close here. And then you said, I think I'm attached to my fear because of my perception of the situation. I'm attached to my perception. Yeah, of course. And I think this idea of fear and worry, someone said something a while ago that I love, and I see it floating around in various ways. But, when it comes to situations that we worry about, I kind of like this. To me, it's very much a reflection of non-attachment in Buddhist teachings. But this idea of, if we worry about something and there's something we can do to change it, to fix it, correct it, to make it okay, then we have nothing to worry about. And if there's nothing that we can do to change it, fix it, correct it, then we have nothing to worry about. Life is going to play out. But this constant obsession to try to control situations to go exactly how you want it to. We're all sitting here on a Saturday at 11 o'clock. It's San Diego. We're 10 minutes from the beach. It's beautiful outside. The fact that we're all sitting here Saturday at 11 o'clock tells me that none of our lives have gone exactly how we thought they would go. And we still experience pain and suffering, and we will experience pain and suffering every day. And that's what the Buddha said. We're going to experience suffering every day. And the less we try to control it and embrace it, then it becomes more joyful. So I'm going to close on that. We'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gain be transferred to those who need it most. All right, before y'all head out, our Dharma Bum host, Ann, has a few announcements for us.
everyone. I'm your host today. My name is Anne. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone with addiction. And our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 4:30. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted on the entryway above the shoe rack. We have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Every first Saturday of the month, we have a half day of silence retreat. It starts at 8, finishes at 12, and you are welcome to join. That will be next week. Please straighten your cushions before you head out. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.